Today we bring you
Reconstructing Spirit Hill.
Finally gotten to that point of our project where we're laying our hardwood floors. And I've never laid hardwood floors until this project. I've laid a ton of different kinds of floors, but this was my first time actually laying old yellow pine hardwood floors. The tongue and groove that gets stapled in on each board. So I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks that we learned along the way to help you with your home project. Now, the main thing that you need to figure out when you're laying hardwood floors is the direction of the floors. When you walk in through our front door and you walk into the foyer here, the first thing you're going to see is how the floor goes down the hallway. And if we ran the floor perpendicular to the hallway, it would have really shortened the feel of our hallway. But by running the boards parallel with the hallway, we really added the length and depth to the hallway. And the other aspect to this is that when you walk in and you look down that hallway, we wanted to make sure that the boards were straight and centered going down that hallway. Because this house was built in 1900, it's almost impossible to get things completely centered in the house because there's going to be a wall that's off just a little bit. Even though we spent a lot of time reframing the exterior and really trying to square things up, there's always a possibility of having something just a little off. So what we did starting out was we took a line down the center of the hallway and snapped the line so that we knew what would be straight and what would look right going all the way down the hallway. And then we took some boards and we braced them with scrap pieces going down the hallway to make sure that we had a hard starting surface since we weren't starting against the wall. And when you do this, you're going to be laying some of the flooring going backwards. And no matter what they say, whatever pro says, you're going to end up working backwards. And at some point in the project, we just decided to make it a lot harder on ourselves to get the perfect look and work backwards on half of the house. So by starting kind of going down the hallway and having that board in the center and working our way backwards, we're actually working backwards and laying the boards halfway through the house. That makes it a little more difficult because when your stapler puts a staple in the board, it doesn't quite go in all the way and you're fighting the next board to get in. You can end up with just as fine a product when you're done, but it is going to be a little more difficult working that way. If you have a newer home, what I would suggest doing is centering your line and then measuring out in your bedrooms to another specific point, firing down another line, and then kind of building out from that direction and maybe adjusting your gaps a little bit as you go. But again, by starting in the center here, if you're willing to fight it, you're going to get real tight gaps going in each direction. Your exterior walls, if there's anything uneven, it's going to be way out there. You're not going to notice it in the main part of your house. It's a much nicer way to go if you don't mind putting up with the headache of working backwards. So let me show you some of the tools that you're going to need to get started with this project. So let's take a look at our saw line up here. For a lot of special cuts, especially when you're having to do curves around toilets and things like that, I highly suggest having a jigsaw in hand. A jigsaw you can really put in there, you kind of turn it as you cut. It's a saw that you can't do this project without. For a lot of our specialty cuts that are more square, you're going to see us use the skill saw, or a combination of the skill saw and a Dremel The Dremel can really get some nice hard to hit corners, and the skill saw, you can do just about anything. You can even rip these boards down. You know, you can use a table saw to rip them down, but when you're going up along the edges of the walls, you don't have to have it perfect, because you do kind of even need a little bit of a gap there before the wall. So skill saw works absolutely fine. Table saw would be a lot safer. The other saw that we're using, and a saw that is absolutely mandatory for this project, is the miter saw. Miter saw gives us a perfectly neat, clean, straight cut on each board. Without that clean, straight cut, you can't put the boards close together. You're going to notice a gap. If you try and do it with the skill saw and it's even a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch off, you're going to notice those gaps, and you're going to have enough gaps as it is. So you want to try and minimize your gaps. Get a good miter saw. This miter saw has had its better days, and it's probably not the safest one in the world anymore, but it does the job for us, and we've done a lot of work with miter saws, so it's not something that we're afraid to use. But get a saw lineup that you feel comfortable with. Definitely create a workbench. You know, we have a kind of a makeshift bench down there set up so that we can keep the boards completely flat as we run them through our miter saw. And this is a great setup for saws and setting up the cutting area for your project. So right here are kind of our main gun lineup. We have a floor nailer. Now this actually shoots in to the ground some staples. They're about 2 inches long, and the way that this works is you sit it on top of the board and you kind of line it up. If you're working backwards, you're going to have to do a lot of banging to get those boards tight, but then when you're ready to go and you have everything set, bam, you gave it a good whack. And when you give it a good whack down here, what's going to happen is it's going to pinch the boards together and shoot that 2-inch staple into the side of the board, pressing these together so that you have virtually no gap in between your boards as you're putting down your hardwood floors. You cannot do a hardwood floor project without the floor nailer. They're about $185 at Lowe's. Go get yourself one. Don't waste your time renting, because you're probably going to take more days on the project than you think, and you can probably buy one for the price that you're going to end up renting it for. The other nailer that we used on this project was just a finish nailer. What we did with the finish nailer is when we get up close against a wall or we're in tight corners where we cannot use the floor nailer, we're surface nailing it by just popping nails in. When you're working on your floors, don't worry too much about the top nailing or other things. Obviously, you want to try and keep your gaps down. You want to try and keep your holes down. But when we get back to finish the floors, we're going to take care of a lot of those things with our fillers and our finishing methods and sanding it down. So definitely make sure that you have both of these tools on hand. And if you're running with 2 people and you're using a lot of air, we've actually got these hooked into 2 separate air compressors because we have smaller air compressors. But you could, if you have a larger air compressor, run both these guns off of them. A lot of times we'll split up work, and one guy will be on one part of the house, another guy will be on the other. So it helps to have 2 air compressors on hand if you can. The other tools you're really going to want on this project are a good set of hammers. The ripping hammer is going to give you these real flat teeth that you can really slide underneath boards and knock them in if you want to pry something up. I like to have a regular hammer on hand as well. If I find any nails in the floor before I'm putting that flooring down, I can pull them up. It's just good to have 2 different sets of teeth that you can work with, and 2 different size hammers. The other thing that you'll find, especially at an older home like this, as you go around, are things kind of popping up out of the floor before you put your boards down that's making it uneven, and you can just kind of pound them in if you have a hammer on hand and keep it on your belt. The other thing we use for that is a scraper. There are a lot of places around this house where they had done the drywall, there was still mud on the ground. In certain areas we had to break drywall out because it wasn't put up against the wall quite tight, or there was something stuck behind it. For whatever reason, when you're going around and you're putting this hardwood floor down, you're going to have to make modifications. And these are 3 great tools just to have on hand. as well as a screwdriver or anything else that you might normally have in your tool belt, because you're going to run into complications as you do this project, and you're going to need these things if you want to keep moving forward. So what I have here is I have the underlayment to our house. The underlayment that we're using is simply just a paper. It's a silicone vapor shield. You don't need anything else underneath these hardwood floors. When you're dealing with hardwoods, it's a solid piece of wood. When you step on it, it's got a solid sound. You don't need anything else except for something that acts as a moisture barrier. I've looked at some of the plastics out there, and I don't like them because when you step on the wood, you might hear the plastic crinkling underneath. It's no good. So go with the paper. Paper's cheap. It's easy. You just kind of roll it out, overlay each roll by 4 inches, go along your edges, staple it down. Now we use a stapler that is a compressor stapler, so that we're just pulling it with our finger. We're not tiring out our hand trying to squeeze it all over the place. But you only need to staple it down right along the edges, and then have a blade handy so that you can cut out along the edges, and you can cut around things like air conditioning ducts. Something you'll notice in our house is that our seams are all over the place. Our boards are all different kind of lengths, and they're just randomly thrown in there. And that was a look that we wanted to go for. If you go on Pinterest or you go on House, you're going to see different types of floors. Look at the floors that stand out to you and the ones that you like the most, and pay attention to where these seams are. Are they uniform? Do the boards run all the way across the room flawless without any lines? And once you figure that out, you can really come in and start placing things together. Ours are all over the place. We have some boards that go full length, we have some boards that only go a few feet, some boards that only go a foot, some boards that go 8 feet. By doing this look, we actually were able to save a lot of money, because we went and bought manufacturer defect for 90 cents a square foot versus paying several dollars a square foot for perfectly flawless boards. When we're done with this, we're going to sand all these down, and all the boards will look relatively the same. And when we go to stain it, that's when we're going to start seeing some of the coolness come out of the floor from having the different sections. So we'll get to finishing it later, but for now, one of the things you need to pay attention to is how you want this floor laid. Do you want your straight line shots, or do you really kind of want the staggered look that we